everybody. Welcome to the Raumati Community Board's public meeting for Takutai Kapiti process. Those of you who don't know me, my name is B. Larissy. I'm the chair of the Raumati Community Board, and this is the second of two of these public meetings that we have run. Last night's one was looking at the Raumati South area south of the Wharemotu stream, and tonight we're going to be focused on north of the Wharemotu stream. So before we kick off, I am going to invite our Ward Councillor Sophie Hampton to open the karakia with us.
So, kia ora te whānau. Kapitaka te hau ki turu, kapitaka te hau ki tona, ki ngā mā, ki ngā pita, ki ngā mā taratara ki tai, he hia ki ana, te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hoku, tihei, mau.
Thank you. Okay, so really pleased to see a bunch of faces here tonight that weren't at the meeting last night, so that just means we are kind of getting some fresh people, which is great, but also those of you who were there last night, good to see you back. The little bit of history for those, because some of you may not have interacted with this process before, and you might not really be sure kind of what's going on. You might have heard some stuff, who knows. So this process is about, and I want to start with an example, which is probably a little bit of health and safety anyway. There's never been a fire in this building. If one does happen though, things could get damaged and people could get harmed. So please make sure that if it does happen, leave through the exits. That's our plan. There is a back door there that has a fire exit door, and there's out here, please leave quickly but respectfully. And that's our plan for that hazard. Likewise, there's a possibility that in some people's eyes, some people's not eyes, that sea levels may rise. If this happens, what are the effects might be, and how do we plan for those effects? In order to assess that, Council has established an independent group that we call Takutai Kapiti, or CAP, Coastal Adaptation Panel, and their job is to look at that, come up with some recommendations which they will make to Council. Council will then assess those recommendations and act on them or not. So, first thing to notice is this process is the start of a bigger process. It's not the end of everything. Okay? There's more to come. If you are interested in the process, we have actually got an illustrator to draw out the process. So feel free after the meeting or during, if you want, just to have a look through that to see what's happened, where we're up to, and what's coming next. I thought that might just be useful for people to sort of have a look for themselves. After the meeting, you will have a chance to put in some feedback or ask questions. We've got some pieces of paper here. So if you've got questions after the meeting, feel free to write your questions on those bits of paper. If you want, give us your email address and we can forward you information, answers to the questions, or a copy of tonight's presentation, which we're more than happy to provide. So, in terms of how this works, this is a meeting that's established by the Raumati Community Board. It's not a council meeting. That's something that we've done. And we have done that because we're hearing in our community in Raumati that people want to hear more about this process. And people want the chance to actually engage with these CAP members directly. Okay? So we've heard that call and we arranged to have CAP members here to come and do exactly that. Okay? We're doing this of our own free will as they are. Okay? So we really appreciate the fact that CAP members have come here on their own time to do this. Okay. If you haven't been to our community board meetings before, we've had some pretty robust conversations in the last year. One of the things that I always insist in our meetings is that people ask or answer questions respectfully, okay? And we're going to have to make sure that that's our standard for a meeting like this. Right? Public meetings can get a little bit rambunctious at times, as we all know, I'm sure. So what we want to do is make sure that whatever happens, it's constructive, right? So if it's not constructive, there's no point, okay? So how this is going to work, at some point when I stop talking, I'm going to hand over to Kat. They will give a presentation, and that's of their making, not mine. Once they've finished, we're going to open it to the floor for Q&A, right? Now, we're not going to filter the questions, we're just going to say, if you've got a question, come forward and ask it. We've got a microphone stand here, so I'm going to put the microphone on the microphone stand. Feel free to come up to the microphone and ask a question there. Feel free to queue up behind the person if you're waiting for a turn. This helps us to create some order. If you can't or you don't want to come forward to ask your questions, we can manage that, right? We're up for whatever happens. But that just helps us kind of facilitate some kind of order, okay? You may not get all your questions answered tonight. You may leave with some further questions, okay? Or you might leave this and get some other information and you think, but hang on, didn't they say something different on that night? So we're kind of here to facilitate any ongoing sort of issues, okay? If you've got some big issues that come up around this process, feel free to forward them to us, the Community Board, and we can help facilitate that sort of information. All of the information that the Takutai Kapiti process is based on is available on their website. Okay, so it's all available, it's not hidden. You can access it, you can download it to your own computer if you want to, if you've got a copy. Okay, it's all accessible. What these guys have done tonight, though, is help hopefully put things into a way that's manageable, that we can understand, and that which will also hopefully open up some questions. Now, what we're here to do, and I should be clear about this in terms of our purpose, what we're here to do tonight is we're here to focus on pathways forward. Okay, so there's been a process with this in terms of some of you may have been at the Raumati Bowling Club last year in July, and they talked about values, what matters to the people in Raumati, and work has been done following that. And they're now at the point of drafting up pathways. So we want some information around what do people think about those pathways and what's your input on it, right? What are your uncertainties? What do you need to know? What can you offer? Okay, so the panel members are just as open to what people in this community have to input into that as they are in telling you what they're doing. But I'll let them talk about their process and we'll see where we get to. So I'm going to hand over now to Don and he will take this part of the process from here.
Thank you, Pete. My name is Don, and I'm a member of the panel, and I'm accompanied tonight by Susie, Martin, and Kelvin. So between us, hopefully, as we progress, we'll be able to answer most of the questions that we are asked. But it's probably important for me to stress that we're here to do just as much listening, or in fact more listening than talking, because what you may have that you can share with us is really probably very important and could influence and probably will influence how we go forward as we move through this process. Now, as Pete has mentioned, it is a process that is ongoing. And no final decisions have been made at this point in time. We are probably only one of a number of streams of work that the council are undertaking, which are all interrelated. And until they all come together, really final decisions can't be made by the council and progress going forward, particularly in terms of planning and other sorts of statutory requirements and obligations the councils have, can't really proceed. But we certainly are going to be recommending to the council that when we finish, which is the end of May, that this process keeps going, because there's a lot more work to be done, and we know we won't get through it all before the end of May. So we've got a presentation here. What we want to try and do is, we didn't just assume that we could come along here and throw a pathway up on the screen and talk about it, because lots of people may not know too much about us, or what our process is, how things work, how we put things together. So we thought we would we'd put some of that up for you as well and explain just how things work, and also probably emphasise the starting and reference points that we're using as a panel, because in the end, apart from Martin, who's a climate scientist, we just a bunch of lay people from the community that put our hands up and said, yeah, we'll have a crack at that and see if we can make a positive contribution for the community. So we're as invested in this as all of you are, and so we want to see the right sort of outcomes just as much as you do. So we put together a few slides just to give a little bit of context and background to the whole issue of sea level rise and climate change. And this particular slide, which we pinched from Berkeley Earth, is showing the actual land and ocean temperature changes over the period of time from 1850 to 2023. And you can see there the land average, which is the red line, has gone up to over 2 degrees, where the ocean average has gone up just over 1. So you can see what that confirms for us as a starter, and the reference point is things are changing, so we need to be aware of that. We thought it would probably be a good idea just to help set the scene, to give some images that show that Kapiti is not immune from rough weather, from the impacts of the changes that are taking place. So we can see here a couple of events, Takutai Kapiti in 2018, Maikanai in 2016, and here's a shot taken, or 2 shots taken 6 years apart, just showing how the landform has changed over that period of time. So it just gives an indication that we have a coastline which continues to change, and it's been doing that, of course, since the beginning of time. So what we're now observing is it's starting to become noticeable and possibly sending us some messages that maybe now's the time to start thinking about how we might deal with it if it continues to progress. And of course all of that can lead to the sort of calamity that struck as Cyclone Gabriel last year. And when I actually sat and watched a lot of the images of the TV coverage, it actually certainly unnerved me, because I had to think about how would I feel if my home, my livelihood, everything that I've built in my lifetime all disappeared in one night. That's pretty scary stuff. And while our brief is about sea level rise, which is pretty hard to notice that it's changing because it's quite slow, associated with climate change, with increasing temperatures, and with all the atmospherics that go with that, are those sorts of events, which just how you plan for those, I'm not quite sure. We thought a little bit of a cartoon might help to lighten things and just give a few serious messages, but in a fairly light-hearted way. And I'm sure if you look at the frogs and sandbags, that's probably how people up on the East Coast were feeling a year ago. And what the slides are really signalling is that people have reached a stage where they know about climate change, they know things are changing, but it's not that fast, we don't really need to worry about that yet, not really necessary for us to do anything. And if that's what you think, you're wrong. And so here we have another graph which shows projections, and this is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And what they've attempted to do is to extrapolate using a couple of scenarios, a low scenario and a high scenario, how things could change over a fairly long period of time. So not many of us are going to be around until 2150, I suppose. But you can see there that it could be quite significant. So these are all signals that create the reference points that have enabled us to move forward. So I want to talk about the process that the CAP's doing, because we've tried to keep this fairly simple. And one of the reasons why we've done that is that for most of us, we need things to be fairly simple. Otherwise, we can't figure things out. So we haven't got hung up on things like science, where I know there's a debate going around about which might be the best science and which we should be using. But what we've accepted from the science is that things are changing, and that we need to recognise that things are changing. And because the science can't tell us how fast and by what degree, there's a heck of a lot of guesswork that has to go into making plans and taking things forward. So the way that we've actually looked at this is we've developed a process to keep things fairly simple. The first step in that was we recognised when we got the reports, the science and the other technical reports, that our coastline changes are not consistent right across the Kapiti coast. So, for example, people up in the north are still getting accretion along their beaches, so their beach is not eroding, whereas down here, you've got erosion, and so you've got some fairly hefty structures that you've had to put in place to help keep people safe. And so we need to treat all of those differently. So we need to look at how planning can be undertaken and what things can be going, to recognise the differences. And within each of those defined areas, there are a whole lot of sub-areas. So we haven't looked at them as just one big area. We've also subdivided those areas up because, again, it all varies, and we need to recognise that. What I can say is that while we have been working with the northern central Raumati and Takutai adaptation areas, the Queen Elizabeth Park is actually administered by Greater Wellington Regional Council. They have a reserve management plan for the park, so we are actually not doing any work along that coastline at this stage. So what you can see that there develops from there is a series of actions that we're taking for each of those adaptation areas. And the first of those is we define some objectives, and we'll go into that. We refine our list of actions, the different things that we might be able to do to meet those objectives. We develop some pathways so that people have a sense of where things might move over time. And then we go through a whole lot of multi-criteria decision analysis criteria weighting to figure out which of the options might be the best. And we've made some progress in there, but it's all at a very preliminary stage, and certainly nothing is final at this point in time. So this slide just simply shows you the 5 adaptation areas. So you can see the northern, the central. Northern really covers from Otaki down through to Peka, with Waikanai, Paraparu and Oklahoma in the central adaptation area. You all know about Raumati and the different parts of Raumati, so don't have to explain that. Then there's Queen Elizabeth Park and Kapiti. So that's how it all fits together. So if we talk about reaching an objective, the first phase of that is to find out what the community values. Some of you may have attended the Raumati Bowling Club Community Values Workshop in July of last year. We certainly took away a lot of good information from that workshop, and in fact, it translated into 1,163 comments that we needed then to actually filter and make sense of and refine down into a set of key values. And as you will be aware, if you were at that workshop, there were 4 key questions. Those key questions are used at every one of the workshops, and those are what you all responded to and that we then analysed. And so what we came up with from all of those comments was these 5 key themes for Raumati. So first of all, you enjoy the access to your local natural environment. The coastline sustains the community and contributes to well-being. The beach is an accessible recreation space for the community, ensuring good infrastructure and governance processes that protect the community and a level of physical protection from potential hazards. So those community values, or those themes, those key themes, are what then became the driver of the objective that the panel developed to enable it to then start thinking about what sort of plans could be put in place and what sort of response there could be. So that was the objective there that we developed from all of those key themes. So, and you can read that, and it very much follows what we had filtered out from the information that we received. So when we start looking at options and actions, which so that we can connect to that objective, we have a whole smorgasbord. What you're seeing here on the screen is the short list, because what we are presented with is a long list of options and actions, and we need to go through those lists and edit out any option or action that just doesn't make sense and wouldn't work. And there are not much point in keeping it on the schedule if it's a dead gut and isn't actually going to make any difference or be helpful or even practical or actionable. So that is the short list. You can see that there's a number of options, and then under each of those options there's a whole bunch of actions. And so what we needed to do as we move forward was look at which of those options are appropriate, and under those options, what actions are going to work best. And this is really critical in terms of getting your input, because when you look at the pathways that we have developed, what we need to hear from you is, do you think they work? Do they make sense? Are they something that you could live with if you had to? And bearing in mind, we hope not, but we have to be prepared. So, in developing the pathways, we use short, medium and long-term time frames. And the reason why we didn't put particular years on this is because we don't know. Nobody can say when something is going to happen, because there are so many other variables out there in play that nobody can really accurately define or forecast what's going to happen with, and by how much. So we developed and used short, medium and long-term time frames, and we used 2 sea level rise scenarios. And while we picked those out of the science and the research that's been done, what they really say is we thought it was sensible to have a nice low scenario that didn't consider too much change, but we also needed to think about, well, what happens if the worst happens? What might that look like? So we needed to put that into the equation as well. So those are the 2 scenarios, and we looked at those in terms of the impacts on the built environment, on people, on the ecology, natural character, and cultural values. So what actually was done as we moved into this phase is that the council project team, in conjunction with the technical advisory group, which we work with, they went through and carried out a risk assessment to see to what extent all of those different characteristics could be impacted by the sea level rise scenarios. And they categorised the risks in terms of low, medium, high and extreme. And they put those into a table so that we got a sense of what we were talking about when we started to develop pathways. And so for some of the characteristics, the risks are higher than they are for others. It just happens to depend where you are and what happens and when. So as we move forward to develop those pathways, we were conscious also that we needed to do some refinement to actually analyse and figure out which of the pathways might work and which wouldn't. And so we assessed them over a series of what are referred to as multi-criteria decision-making factors. And there were 8 of them, and they're all listed on that slide. So all of those came into play, and they were considered as we moved forward. So the first part of that, when we're looking at those criteria, was that we had to recognise that while all of those criteria are important, some are more important than others. So we needed to have a way of factoring that into our process. And the way we do that is that we give them weightings. And the weighting is from 1 to 3. So clearly 3 is the highest weighting and 1 is the lowest. So they're all important, but some are a little more important than others. And I know you can't read that stuff that's on the slide. It was pretty hard to get it to fit. Hopefully you might be able to read it in the handout, but if you can't, we can make it a copy so you can see it. So those are the weightings that we used. So we then had to move to the next phase, and that is using what we call the scoring guide. Now the way the scoring guide works is, again, it looks at each of the criteria, and it assesses each of those impacts across a range of scores from 1 to 5, 5 being the most desirable because it creates the most benefit, and 1 being the worst because it's highly undesirable, and numbers in between. So again, the print on that's fairly small, but again we can make do with copies later. So those are the tools that we had available to us to actually go through and develop the pathways. And what happened next is that our technical advisory team, they actually worked through for us and developed a long list of pathways. And the long list of pathways is, I'm pretty sure that's this long list here. I could be wrong until we get to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? No, that is the short list. So go back, that's the short list. We had a much longer list. And what we do with that long list is we refine it down to the 4 or 5 or 6 pathways that we think are the most practicable and workable and sensible for this area and for the people of this area. And as you can see, there are 6 pathways that we selected. There are short, medium and long-term scenarios. And in between each scenario, each action, there is an arrow. That arrow does actually mean something. Doesn't mean you automatically go from short to medium to long, because short-term for pathway 1, for example, could be a lot shorter or longer than it is for pathway 2. It just depends what happens. So that is the actual short list of pathways that we developed, which show the actions that can be taken. And so what we did then, when we got to having developed those pathways, next slide, we then go through a scoring process to see, well, which of these pathways might be best. And these numbers are only preliminary, they're not final. So I don't feel as though what's on here is sort of cast in stone or anything like that. So what this table does is it shows on the left-hand side the criteria, and in brackets beside the name of each criteria is the weighting for that criteria. So you can see it's either a 1, 2 or 3. And under each of the pathways, which are across the top,
one being the highest.
no, one's the lowest. And you'll see why. I'll explain how this works. So across the top are all the pathways, and whatever score they got from 1 to 5, and you're immediately saying, hang on a minute, those numbers are bigger. Went in against those pathways. But that number then is multiplied by the weighting of the criteria. So if you look at pathway 1, which has 6 for ecology, all you need to do is divide the 6 by the 3 against the ecology, and it tells you that the weighting you put on that, the score it got was 2. So that's how that table looks.
The 1 to 6 at the top under pathways. Those are the 6 areas.
Across the top, yes, there are 6 pathways.
I'll just jump in. Do you want to just hold questions? We can come back to the slides, that's absolutely no problem. Do you want to just make a note in here, just so that we can deal with the questions afterwards together?
I know this can be a little bit complicated, especially if you see it for the first time. One of the things you'll notice on this table is that the Maori values line is black, and the reason for that is that our iwi members have been asked to do the scoring for that particular criteria, and unfortunately at this point in time that information is just not available, so we couldn't include it. And that's why these numbers are only preliminary, because when you've done the maths, you multiplied everything out and put it in the table and got some totals, that then gives an indication of, at this point in time, which of those pathways might be the most preferable. But again, one of the things, the key things that's missing from this table is the economic analysis. Because inevitably that is going to be a key driver of what in the end is the pathway that is selected. But we don't have that information as yet. We're getting it, but we don't have it at the present time. So, when we've done that chart, we've done that analysis, we can then draw out, and what the project team have drawn out for us is the 3 top scoring pathways. Because those are the pathways that will be subjected to economic analysis, or are being subjected at the moment to economic analysis, and for which we will get that information, I understand it, on 6th of April. So that's in a few weeks' time. So those are the three pathways, and we're happy to take, as we move forward through the evening, take questions on those so we can explain to the pathway in more detail. And of course, we then move on to what is a very important phase of the process, but which we will not be able to complete within the time frame that has been set for the camp. Not going to get this done by the end of, we have to be the end of April, because this sort of process, when we actually inserting signals, triggers and thresholds, it's got to be done to every pathway. And as you can appreciate, there are several pathways for each of the different adaptation areas. So that's quite a lot of work that will need to be done. So these are really crucial, because what the signals are doing is they're the point at which you get a message that says, hey, things are starting to change, you might want to start looking at doing something, putting a plan into action. It might mean that you may need to, because it's telling you you've reached a threshold, move from one stage of a pathway to another at some point in the future. So contained within that then are the triggers, and once the trigger is reached, it's time to change and do something else. And then of course, once you change and do something else, you'll move towards another signal which will then tell you it's time to keep it going. And that all happens over time. So it's not going to happen tomorrow or the next day, right? But it will happen over time. And as I mentioned, we will be talking about signals, triggers and thresholds as early as next week, but it will only be at a fairly superficial and high level, I suspect, because there's a lot of work involved, and we can't get that done within the time frame, which for us is to complete our important recommendations by the end of May. So, this is the new slide. This wasn't in yesterday, so those of you who came yesterday, you didn't see this slide because it wasn't there. And this is a pet project of Martin, so I'm just going to give him the mic and say, do you want to talk about this, Martin?
Well, nothing to do with me, but someone has gone and talked to the company internally. I think the key point here is that we don't know all the solutions yet. We're developing them as we go. And this is not just New Zealand. I mean, it's going on all around the world. People are seeing, well, anyone at the coastline is seeing problems, and they're coming up with techniques. And so it's a very active area. I'm going to talk at college tomorrow. I'm going to encourage the students there to think about this as a career for them, to look at coastal defense mechanisms and coastal adaptation technique. It's a rapidly growing area. But this is one that we're seeing in New Zealand. A company based in Tatoni has now pioneered a design for these interlocking blocks that lock together. He talks about honeycomb, just how a bee constructs its hive and how that can really work and be strong. And so he's got these concrete blocks that interlock and fit into that. And the point is, it's not like it's better than like a crib wall or something like that. It has a nice gentle slope on it going back. And then the waves coming in, a lot of the simple things is an upright wall. The wave coming in, its whole energy hits that wall. And that causes a lot of vibration, shaking, erosion, water trying to get down into the sand or around the corners. This moderates it out much more gradually as it goes up. That technique is actually used right across Europe already and parts of America. So the engineering techniques are well advanced in some places, and New Zealand has to do a little bit of catching up. But on this one, with Eco Reef, we might even go ahead of them. So it's a rapidly developing area. That's the key point. And we need to sort of watch this space and find better techniques all the time.
Thanks, Martin. So I just wanted to touch on now and what the next steps are for us, because this is an ongoing process. And as I mentioned before, our next workshop, which is next week, signals, triggers and thresholds. So we'll be doing that, I think, at a fairly high level. And as you can see there, on the 3rd of April, we get the economic analysis. That's going to be very important. And we finalise our final webinar in mid-April, and then we start writing reports and reporting to council. What I haven't put on that slide is ongoing community engagement, because when you read that through, one of the thoughts that may go through your mind is, hang on a minute, are we going to get things saying this? Are you going to come back and tell us what you're going to do, what you're going to recommend? Absolutely we are. We're going to have to talk to people like Bede and say, how do we get in and gate crash your party at your community board meetings and talk to the community about the economic analysis, about what the report is looking like, what sort of recommendations we've got, because we really do need feedback to ensure that we get that as right as we possibly can. And we certainly aren't going through this process thinking we know all the answers. We don't even know all the questions. So until we actually get our head around that, it's going to be really quite challenging for us to progress and move forward.
John, there's a couple of points here, and people might have picked up on this. When we're looking at the scoring on this, we see that Pathway 5 has scored 42 points. For whatever reason, that has not been carried forward. We're wondering what that is. We're trying to find that out.
Can you say that again? Because we can't hear you through your mask.
Well, I'm from where my daughter's got COVID at the moment.
Yeah.
So.
You might find that.
So, yeah, if you look at the scoring here, Pathway 5 comes in at 42 points, but it is not included in that shortlist.
So can you explain what Pathway 5 is? Is this a region?
No.
It's in the slide. So
If
you've
you
got
look
that
at that flag there, number 5, that's the sea wall.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So it's just to make you aware that we've got a question up to people. The other thing that I'd like to say is about EcoReef. I've spoken a lot with the guy that owns the company. He is prepared to put in a 100-metre wall at cost, if anybody is interested. Just so you can see the benefits you can get from EcoReef. So that's something that you pick up with Tim. Yeah? If you want to follow that up.
Thank you. We've now come to the end of the presentation, so it's now time for you to feed back to us. You can ask us any questions, but in addition, if you've got information that would be helpful for us, we would love to get it from you. I just want to take a moment before I give this microphone back to you, Bede, to acknowledge the community board, because we've been very impressed with the proactive approach that the Raumati Community Board has taken to engaging the community on this in particular, because it's the issue we're dealing with. But I suspect it's the way this community board works, and it was really good to see that the board is so active with the community and so well connected. So it's a job well done, guys, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Cool. So now you know everything about the second horizon and the process to assess it and plan against it, right? So, yeah, so no doubt you'll have some questions coming out of that. It might take a few minutes to kind of process all of that and really kind of start to form some views and questions, so that's fine. We have timetabled until 9 o'clock tonight. Okay, so we're not in a rush to kind of rush through 5 questions and then go. We want to spend that time to get through the questions that we need to get through, okay? So what we're going to do, as I said, if you can kind of line up by the microphone stand, then we can just take you first come, first served. You're not going to filter them or order them or anything like that. I'll sort of run the mic because we've only got one, unfortunately, because I couldn't get 2 at the last minute. That's the way it goes. There might be some questions I can jump in and kind of provide a little bit of information, but most of the questions can probably be answered by the CAP panel members themselves. But just reminders, there's probably an awful lot of things that we could get bogged down and argue about in this sort of area. But what we need to do, what these guys are going to do in a week's time is go into the process of looking at what are the pathways forward for Raumati. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to make sure that they've got the views of the Raumati people in their heads when they hit that meeting. Okay? So that they make sure that the recommendations that they make reflect what you guys think and how you live, how we live, and what we want for our future. Okay? So if you've got questions about the pathways, let's hear them. We might allow a little bit of, stuff outside that, don't worry. But just take a risk. If you've got a question in your mind, take a risk, ask it, and we'll see where we get to. So, Martin, did you get your question? Sorry, I know I interrupted, and I apologise, but I just wanted to let them talk. But that did satisfy you? Cool. I dare say you've got a few other questions in your mind as well. Do you want to kick us off? Right. Put you over just. Sure.
So, I'm sort of facing this direction because I'm talking to
Just with this microphone, it's not very sensitive, so just put your mouth quite close to it.
So, having attended a number of meetings, and this being one of the meetings, I do have a lot of questions. I guess I start off, so who started the whole process? I was told that CAP is an independent advisory body that would feed back to Kapiti Coast District Council. But then over the meetings I realised there is quite a connected relationship between the Coastal Action Panel, Coastal Advisory Panel, if I've got the name right, and the Kapiti Coast District Council. And then I hear the relationship between the Kapiti Coast District Council, Ministry of the Environment, DOC, and the government. So, I realise that we're talking about a bigger picture here than just your little panel group. The second one is that the funding of the process is funded, from what I can see, by Kapiti Coast District ratepayers. Okay, so we need to have an involvement in this process. Where you talk about the next steps and not having a community involvement in there, I have a real concern that we're marching down a modelling projection road that we might have an input into but might not. And so one of the things you mentioned in your slide was around the United Nations Panel for Climate Change grading 4.5, which I had understood had been downgraded in the last 18 months. And the other number there, which is the 8.5, is the Jacobs report model. And as I understand, a lot of the projection and modelling is being based on the 8.5. And I would like to be able to talk about that, but we don't seem to have opportunity to do that. We seem to mention it, and then that somehow gets put aside to talk about values and what we like about living on the coast and what we're looking forward to enjoying in the future. So for me, the real biggie is your absolute first opener that says our climate is changing and the sea is rising. Now, I would have to say that is an assumption, and it is assumed upon something, and it's assumed upon some scientific modelling, and that's what I'd like to talk about. I've lived here for 36 years, and I'd have to say, this is not obvious to me. So it is being based on something, and that's what I'd like to talk about. The next one is, it seems to me, from the reading that I've done, that the Council has changed the focus from a legal requirement to provide a coastal hazards register
Martin,
to something else.
sorry, I am going to cut in here because your inquiry is very valid, and they carry a lot of concern, but I think we've actually had a lot of conversation in our community boards about some of this stuff. But I'm also mindful that one of the key purposes here is to feed in about pathways. So I don't mind that we talk about some of that stuff around it, but can we keep the conversation more focused on the pathways, because that's actually what we need to make sure gets in at this stage. Because if we miss that, Raumati as a community misses something really important.
Let me run in here.
Yep.
Don't want to know what your questions are.
Right.
But what we could do is actually take this offline from here and have a more in-depth discussion.
Sure. Can I just finish with a few here? You mentioned about the Te Ao Māori values. I'd like to know what those are. Because there will be ramifications for inserting Te Ao Māori values in.
There are two reports have been published that should be going on the Takutai Kapiti website. One for the southern Iwi and one for the northern, the coastal languages.
Yes.
Those have been prepared and they're available.
And probably the last two I'd like to finish with. One is, and I've heard this at the meetings here, we can look at different pathways, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the economic judgment as to whether they are able to be managed. And then my question is, as a ratepayer, who's making the decisions that say yay or nay on the economic side? And the second one is that the insurance companies are definitely taking a trigger from these news reports to begin to say we're not going to insure properties in this region. So there is an interrelatedness between the discussion and the reports of this in the marketplace and the insurance companies saying, well, we're going to move fairly smartly on this, and suddenly say, sorry, we're not going to insure your property.
Well, the insurance companies are actually doing a lot of this work independently. The insurance companies actually are doing a lot of this work totally independently of us. They gave a major presentation to Christchurch City Council last year, and one of the points they made there was that if they see that councils are actually trying to put some effort into protecting the environment, they are more likely to actually be prepared to keep insurance policies running. And that's a statement that they keep on making. The other thing is, you asked about the costings, and that's a decision for the council.
Or the ratepayers.
Well, from our perspective, it goes forward to council, and then what council do with it is out of our hands. I personally, as a ratepayer, I agree. We should have input into that. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, thanks, Mark. Good, as always, some good questions. Always appreciate your input. I can just offer a little bit about that in terms of the council process. So what will happen is this group will provide recommendations only, okay? So just because CAP says something at the end of their process doesn't mean it's going to happen. They're recommendations. We all know governments pay millions of dollars for recommendations all the time that end up in a drawer. I don't think that's what's going to happen to these recommendations. But the next step will then be council will have to go through a big consultation process about what happens with those. And that will be very open to public input. I'll certainly be somebody who will be in there making sure that Raumati gets a chance to input into that conversation, as I kind of have already so far, because it matters, and it matters a lot, right, to me, to this community. I've lived in Raumati permanently for 18 years, actually I said 15 last night, but it's 18. I've got 2 shops in the village here, so what happens here matters to me a lot. I'm certainly keen to make sure that the Raumati voice gets heard through that process, and there's a lot of requirement on council to consult heavily through that process. If council is going to do stuff, it's going to be a coastal plan change, and those sorts of district plan changes have big requirements for public consultation. So it won't just suddenly wake up one night and everything's changed, right? I know that's one of the fears, because there was a moment in our history where we woke up one day and found lines on maps, right? It took legal action to get rid of them and all that sort of stuff. So if it goes forward, it will be under a coastal plan change with huge consultation. All right. And just another thing, when you step up, do you want to just give us your name and let us know, I don't know, how long you've lived in Raumati, just so we kind of know who each other is.
Thank you. My name is Chris Tweedy. I've lived only in Raumati only for the last 4 years. But I've got a couple of questions, if I may. And it's sort of a little bit beyond the theory and trying to get a bit more to the practical. Your first slide says long-term plans have to allow for losing some of the land that currently contains houses, roads and other infrastructure. So can you give us some kind of idea about your thinking in terms of the practical way you're going to handle this? From the Wairuku stream up north, we've got a couple of sets of issues there. There's some existing board type areas there. There's some which have stones in front of them, and there are others where it's just straight blocks of cement and concrete and whatever. And so is that your practical way of thinking on retaining the future? And the second part on just exactly that paragraph is that as I read Dr. Google's maps, almost all of the built-up residential land is actually where the retaining walls are on private land. So does that mean that your thinking is that council will in fact only protect the roadworks and the services under the roads along from what Marine Parade, I suppose it is. So you're looking only at the council doing that and then changing the cost onto beachfrontage residences. And by the way, I've got a disclosure, I don't own a beachfront.
Okay, stay there if you like. You might have a follow-up question once you
No.
Okay.
Thanks, Peter. Those were really great questions, but I don't actually have any answers because you've actually gone forward from where we are and where we will be when we get to reporting. So we don't go down the track of the actual practical implementation of the changes that may have to occur if some of those thresholds are reached and some of those pathways actions have to be activated. So they're really good questions. I think the council is going to have some very robust debates around figuring out just how that can be made to work. And certainly, when we add the economic analysis onto that pathway information and factor that into the scoring, that will give us a clearer idea of what sort of order those pathways should sit in. But we don't know that yet.
Thank you.
Could I comment on the point about Summer Creek? The reason that's in there is because we can see it happening in other parts of the world, and we're not that much different. There are places like quite a bit of the seaboard of China. Although the Chinese government has a lot of money going into defence, they're moving back from that. A well-known one, actually, if you know some of the film industry coverage of this issue, they do. Louisiana is on sinking land as well as rising sea level. And they've made award-winning films on people who have had to travel retreating over about a 10, 15-year period. And with people refusing to retreat, and the others getting out quickly. That's just some very interesting films. It can happen here.
In terms of that too, in terms of the seawalls, Chris, you may or may not be aware, so south of the stream is a big council-owned seawall, right? That's about to get replaced over the next few years. We've actually got next Tuesday on the 19th of March, we've got a community board and we'll be getting a presentation from council about that. North of the seawall, that's all private wall and nothing to do with council. So there's that kind of distinction. All right.
My name is Jackie. Is that right in here? Cool. I've also got a comment hear all of your questions and to be able to read it on the reports that is offline. So when we get the opportunity to hear all of your questions that you've left us now, so they are recorded in the report, because I really love it and very, very good. Okay, so that's the first one. This has been a lot of work and you know, you put a lot of work in on a geese. You know, but one word you used with your geese was when it was going to happen. We've got to use the word it. It's sort of creating a lot of fear. And some of your photos maybe didn't show the positive photos where things have not happened yet. You're just showing the negative photos because fear doesn't work with people that haven't COVID thing. You just create fear. And people will come back here, you know? Okay. Right, my question is, I've got two. At yesterday's meeting, the CAT members agreed last night that each of you has a comprehensive understanding of the technical and scientific data modelling that underpins the recommendations for Kapiti Coast. Can you please explain to me why the Jacobs methodology and assessment report uses the broom rule? Okay. Secondly, why has Jacobs defined Kiwi Park shoreline as a single coastal south?
Two questions.
That's two. And seven comments.
All right.
Our report is going to go beyond what's done by Jacobs. I know what you're saying. We will not be limited by what's in the Jacobs report.
But how do we know that?
Well, I'm telling you that we're going to write the report. We're going to write our report, okay, which is really it's our review of what's been done for the council. And not just that, I mean, also the Ministry for Environment report and things like that, and there's much broader context here. You're exactly right, the Brooms rule is rubbish. You know, and in science we know that. It wouldn't be used in the science studies for more than 10 years now. But unfortunately the consulting companies are still using it because they don't have the techniques to do anything more sophisticated and use a lot of data to do it in a more sophisticated way. That's why just how far back you go right will have an effect. It's still a bit of an unknown. But if you want to know where I think we have a lot of hope to get this right, is the work being done in South Dunedin by Geological Nuclear Sciences, and a guy I met there is world leading. They have really done a really good analysis of how water on the ground changes, and that's a big factor in how far the water goes back. They're interrelated. So this is a moving game, if you like. Everything is changing the whole time. And I can see several areas in which New Zealand is really going to be right at the front internationally. I mentioned the coastal defence and the interlocking blocks. Here's another one. GNS working on the best analysis we've seen so far, how the water moves through the ground and how that changes the risk. It's all watch the space, am I right? And we're all going to try and defend that coastline as much as we can.
Just actually sort of remember comments like when can we get to read Mike's questions actually documented? Because I would like to know rather than just having a catch up with him after here, I'd actually like to read a written report on it. And when will you start presenting more positive photos? This gentleman was just more no fact, you know, positive. You just show negative photos, show okay, this happened over 6 years, but it hasn't happened yet. So we don't know what's happening rather than when it's going to happen.
Oh, we acknowledge we don't know when. It really
But
is.
can you start presenting more positive pictures
Well,
of people rather than
one of the reasons we're doing that is to actually try and get people to acknowledge that there is the potential for that to happen. We can't go with our heads in the sand, literally.
it was a bit of feeling like, okay, this is likely to happen, so this is where it's not happening.
I
We're
suppose
just showing you
That's
that
probably
this-
good, just to get kind of argumentation.
Oh, no, it's not happening, it's not, it's actually this, so I don't need to come across as that, I need to show contrast. Yeah.
Okay. if we can find some positive ones, then
Thank you, that's all. It's all right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I just say that eco reef thing, and we've shown a picture of it, developed with Tony, that guy is using it to extend the land that the road is on. That's being done out of Lake Ferry, the Greater Western Regional Council. It's actually improving the quality of the road than what was there before. We can actually make things better. It's really good engineering it.
That's great.
Start.
Yes. So we'll just present Tom. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, no, it's about time we said the word. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Conor McLeod, I'm relatively fresh in the community. Whilst we can appreciate that climate change is occurring now, I think we can all admit that the full impacts of it won't be felt for generations to come. What engagement are you doing with youth over the rest of the report, and what have you done so far?
Engaging with youth has been very challenging, and we have not had a lot of input from youth into the process so far. We're currently working with Papua College. We will be talking to students there tomorrow and going through a similar sort of process, perhaps in work context than we have tonight. But we certainly have made contacts with what we would have thought would be the people that could actually put us into contact with youth. But we're certainly open to more assistance in that area, because we do acknowledge that it's our young people who are going to be most affected, probably, but they're proving to be the hardest group for us to reach. And I know it was really impressive at the Paikakariki Values workshop that we did recently. We had a whole table there of young people who really got involved in the process and gave us a lot of really good feedback. And certainly we'd like a lot more of it. One of the other things too I should mention, I was reminded, we do have one young person on our panel. Unfortunately she's overseas at the moment because she's got a job that's taken her out of New Zealand, but she has been incredibly valuable and certainly a source of connection that we are using to try and get us in touch with a younger audience.
And she grew up in Raleigh. So,
Thank you. My name is Glenys Tobin, and I am also a relatively new resident of Raumati, and I have a mix of questions and comments. My first is that actually, I don't know if I've been living under a rock or something, but commenting on the pathways kind values of different communities, in particular in relation to the wellbeing framework. And I'm really, really surprised that in the community values, nobody mentioned property values and the flow and effects of rates, insurance, and so on. So I think that's just interesting. I'm not sure what methodology was used, but it's curious that that didn't arise, or that kind of things didn't arise as an issue. The economic well-being of individuals within the community, which is therefore related to property values, rateable values, and insurance costs. And then when you talk about kind of putting an economic lens over all of this, what does that really mean? Is that economic in terms of costs and benefits to council, or is it costs and benefits to different communities within the region, the district? And I think that's all for now. I can probably think some little bit of things, but
I'm sure you can, but it sounds like. All right, we'll get some comments on that, Cheryl. I'd like to start. I will just comment, Glenys.
yes.
Again, just all of the information is available on the Takutai Kapiti website, so all of that data and scientific reports, feedback from value sessions, all that stuff is there on the comments.
Seeing as I put this slide back up, you asked about the areas. And the areas are determined by what is happening on the coast. The northern area is accreting because of the, so it comes down the Otaki River and the Manawatu River. So we're actually getting accretion in that area. As you go down past the peak at Takutai Beach, things change. And they change because of the tides. So the sediment and everything that's flowing south generally does not come further south than that. And by the time you get down to Kapiti, you haven't got any accretion at all. So those areas were actually areas that we were given to deal with, but we were done on that basis.
There's a lot of information available on how high each property is, and you can use that to see the areas that will become most at risk at the time. I mean, typically this sort of thing that happen is like seeing in the meeting, what detail as the sea goes up relative to groundwater. And the first thing you see, in their case, well known now, is there's going to be flooding in houses like 2 kilometers back from the beach. That's going to be the first sign of sea level. So we need to know that a lot more for Kapiti before the council can make balanced decisions. We're waiting for a separate report to come out on groundwater. But in the meantime, our report will point out the need for that. And some examples of why just within the coastal area, you can see some places on lower lying land are going to be at risk before one goes back. So yes, the broad pattern, in big areas, is not the best way to deal with it, but we'll bring it up somehow and to get discussion going, like we are now.
You brought up the point about the concerns about what had come through in the community values workshop. Without rattling through my brain to remember everything that's in it, we have a very detailed report of that workshop, which goes through all of the responses that were received and all of the analysis that's done. And that's public knowledge, public information, so we'd be very happy to get a copy of that, if that would help you to go through and extract the sort of information that you think should have come through, but hasn't. It's on the website as well.
I just want to comment on the wellbeing issue that you up, and completely assure you that we've had some really good reports in relation to each different community done by consultants looking at community wellbeing. It's one of the criteria that we take into account, just as we do ecology, landscape, community wellbeing. We do take into account the effect on property values and rates, etc. So completely assure you we have had some really good reports on that. And
Sorry, and how is that filtered into this thinking?
no, but when you go to the ratings, anyway.
We have these discussions all the time, by the way.
Very good.
I think the other point that I wanted to make was sort of irrespective of everyone's perspective on the science, wherever that comes from, if sea level rise is going to happen or doesn't happen, I really take your point about, what did you say, when and if, and I think that it is important that we reflect on that it may not happen, and it might happen. What all we're doing is looking at a plan if it does. So if it doesn't happen, if nothing changes for 100 years, then the pathway, we're in part one of the pathway, we won't be moving into part two of the pathway because nothing happened. If you see what I mean? So it's not a time-based thing. We don't go, oh, every 20 years we're going to jump from part one of the pathway to 2 to 3. It's if a particular event happens, and that's for a future discussion with the community as to what those triggers might be. And it's a really important part for us all to be involved in. You know, we're talking about combinations of storm surges, or the regularity of storm surges, or how close is the dune to your house, or there's a whole myriad of different things. And that will happen after we finish this part of the report.
And just on that side of things, as part of our report, we'll probably be putting in a recommendation that says very strongly there has to be ongoing monitoring. It's no good just saying this is the situation now. It has to keep going.
Thank you. Right.
I'm Jim, I was at the coast 24 years, president, and been here since the 1960s on and off. I've been pretty well most of the Kapiti, and one really positive that's coming out is you are actually listening to the community. Your first presentation was all time-based, based on science. We've just heard that your report is more category associated with trigger events rather than the science itself. The key point I take out of that is if you have a stick in the ground and the sea level touches it over consistently for a 3-month period, now we've got a trigger point which says we've already got plan A if that happens. You shift that peg. If it happens again, you've already got a plan B. So my take is that regardless of the science, it doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong. The stake in the ground and a trigger point is far more important for the community than an actual piece of paper that says that the sky's falling.
Yeah, we totally agree with that.
Yeah. Really important.
The only comment we can make is we agree absolutely with everything you said.
My name is Catherine.
I've lived in the Kapiti Coast, my family and I have been in 27 years, and my grandparents prior to that, much longer. I know it's been touched on this evening, but I think my key question is around community engagement, so I do want to hone in on that. I am a busy mother of 3, so I won't pivot that, but I don't think I'm entirely living under a rock. However, it took a mail drop, not by yourselves, but by a community group, for me to realise what was actually occurring to my own family home. So that's really upsetting. So I know there's a few people here that can find the capacity to sort of have a laugh tonight, but for us it's been a highly stressful time. And we talk a little bit about, you know, the mapping. That map there turns my stomach, and it's not whether I agree or disagree with the science. That's not my area of expertise, nor it's clearly yours. But you know, for it to take a mail drop and for me to have a conversation with council to order a limb and find reference to a Jacobs report on my limb was really it was not transparent, let's put it that way. Yeah. So in black and white, I've got a document that talks about AEP, and I had to find a lawyer to understand what that meant. And she explained about, you know, potential risk factors of flooding and so on and so forth. And guess what AA Insurance said about that? So when we tried to make amends to our house, we're already having to face into this conversation. And this has unfolded between the 23rd of December, so right leading into Christmas, and everybody shut down for a month, and my family and I have spent the last however many weeks trying to understand what that means for us. So I think I'll just finish on a couple of things there. The fact that you've got these maps suggests that you must also have a corresponding, perhaps not right down to the very detail, but of actual houses of residential addresses. No.
These are just arbitrary.
Yeah, so I guess from my perspective, it's certainly, there's evidence to suggest that we do know what streets could be impacted. And you talked about, you know, possibly 2K in certain parts of New Zealand, such as Dunedin. You know, from an engagement perspective, it could be really valuable, and it would have been hugely appreciated if I had been contacted. So, you know, I'm on the mailing list for the Kapiti District Council updates. I haven't seen anything. I went back and searched them, couldn't find anything. I followed the Facebook page for Kapiti Coast, I didn't see anything on there. And so I really feel as though my understanding, when I Googled and came across to a website in quite a lot of depth, was there were 2 things I found. One was a very long paper that did talk about the ICP at 8.5, and it said that the IPCC has deemed it implausible. And yet, I appreciate what you're saying, we need to come up with a range, but I found that statement quite concerning. And so I suppose the second part of that question is, at what point, you know, will you take that feedback on board, and will the board and the panel actually acknowledge that? Yeah, I think that's probably my key question. And have the CAT meetings been closed to the public today? The workshops were closed
They're
today.
meeting the workshops, yeah, they're close to the
So we talk about the nature of.
But the minutes of every meeting is on the website.
I appreciate that, but I've got 3 high needs children in a full-time job, so I don't know, I didn't even know it was happening to look for the minutes. So I just think that you guys, you know, you're obviously, you know, highly intelligent humans, and you would know that there's a possibility to be more transparent and perhaps make a really green effort to engage the people who are on the receiving end of the reports with Jacobs on them. So thank you.
Really useful to hear from somebody who has had that direct impact from this process, and thank you. Obviously, it's not CAT who's responsible for the information on the limbs, it's council, but there needs to be more conversation around that, absolutely.
And I think it's
Right, it's not selective, is it? They just put it on everybody's.
Yeah.
I think if you like, I mean, I'm happy to have some more conversation with you ongoing about this as well, in terms of what you're facing and how you communicate with council about it.
Answer from, what did
So Susie just said that council's put that on all the limbs in the district, not just selective ones. So we all eat poo on that one.
Yeah. Okay.
The minute it came out, what we were told right at the beginning when we started was that when the Jacobs report was pretty much available to us, it was on the council website the next day, and then there was a link to it on every limb for the whole of the council, for the whole of the area. Yeah, just a link to information about the area. That's what we were told. The other thing is that we do find that we sit around talking, how are we going to get, how are we going to talk to people, how are we going to find people. And there's been a lot in the Observer and the Kapiti News, and I know other people don't get it, because I don't, but when I got it, there's been a lot in there. The Anteno app, I have seen it when meetings have come up on that. I mean, I'm just trying to think of how I've ever seen it. I have a daughter about your age, and I say to her, how do we contact you lot, do we go and talk to all the play centres or schools?
We know where I live.
Well, and also, I think BG mentioned yesterday how the council's got no right to use the email addresses that you give to contact anyone, any ratepayer on a matter other than sending out your rates bill. You're not allowed to just send out random emails with the information.
So I've opted into a Kapiti newsletter.
Right.
So everything can't be.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, we would just welcome ideas, because we will, I'm hot on that too, we all are. If we can put recommendations in our report for the next day, just the ideas as to how to connect, then we will do it. And we've had ideas like art shows and all sorts of different things, different ways of connecting.
One of the points I'd like to make is that unlike other councils, we have got no budget to do any communications with the community. So there's no facility for us to do that ourselves. We have to do everything through the council.
Yeah, and I'll add, my discussions with CAP members that they have been very, very concerned about how they reach the community better, so that's why we've been working with them to try and do this. So your concerns are really valid. We've been concerned as a community board too. We're trying to update things on our Raumati Community Board as things like this happen as well, without bogging people down with loads of rubbish. But keep an eye on that Facebook page as much as you can. Stay in touch with us too. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I lived on Country Coast for 18 years, roundabout, and I'm a college teacher. And I've got a few comments. First of all, concerned to hear that you're going out to schools and going to be shown in that same slide show, hoping that you're not.
No, it's different.
Good, because a lot of our young people have a huge amount of anxiety, and it's really important that you show them some pretty pictures of the other side as well, please.
Well, just to let you know, the presentation has gone through the head of department at the college, and she's gone back to us, comments and everything else, so it's not something
Good,
we can
thank
find.
you. And I came here I went to last night's side as well, and I looked at the slide, and I looked at this piece of paper, and I wear glasses. How hard is it, excuse me, I do appreciate your work, but how hard is it to turn that around and enlarge it and do a landscape on one A4 piece of paper, so we could read it?
That has been done by Tim Sutton, who's our board member. No council, look, we're doing what we can. We're also making this slideshow available electronically, so you'll be able to enlarge it and see it better, right?
Yeah, still, but I don't have to see it, sorry.
Well, we can do nothing.
Yeah, you can help me print it out, even some of us.
It would be sideways if we did it differently.
I'm not talking about
It doesn't matter, it has to be read.
I can't read it, so you're giving us information, you're an advisory doing something. But I don't understand your intentions to inform you called the Coastal Advisory Panel, but are you advising the council or about the coast? Because a few questions back, you couldn't answer what you'd be advising the council about the wall, whether it was going to be the rocks or the stones and how the sea would impact it. You couldn't answer that. And I'm just confused. You're the advisory panel to the coast. So who's doing that work? Well, I just think maybe they should change the name. So I don't know. I'm just concerned. But also last night, Mr. Day confirmed that the CAT would provide a draft of recommendations to the entire community prior to giving out recommendations to the council. Can you please confirm what that would look like, what the process would be?
We haven't developed that process yet. We need to work on it.
Okay. Thank you.
One more comment? We met before, yeah. I'm back. I'm still kind of slightly less fresh than I was about 15 minutes ago. I realise that this is about getting some feedback on the pathways, and none of us, including myself, have actually given any feedback. So I just wanted to say that I support Pathway 4. I think that that's because it really reflects one of the first of the 5 key things, which is enjoy access to our local natural environment, and by ensuring that we have enhancing the protection structure, and then moving on to beach renourishment in the long term, and of course the long term starts, today. So ensuring that we maintain the natural beach environment, which really makes Kapiti and such a unique place. That's my support.
So keeping a beach.
But it's supporting, I guess that buffer in between, as for the beaches, the buffer between the sea and the houses, having the ability to walk down, throughout the day, and particularly in the summer months, really, I think, brings a lot of value to the community. It's one of my favourite things about, why I live here. And I guess it translates more to the kind of Queen's Park area, that having those sand dunes, to be able to walk along from there, moving all the way up to the North Kapiti region, is something spectacular, something that I think should be cherished.
Thank you for that positive input about the pathways.
Hi, I'm Joanne. I do have a question, but I just wanted to talk about the community engagement question that you were discussing before, and just give a bit of background. I think you started doing the community workshops started about a year ago. The Otaki one only had 20 people attend, the Otahuanga one had 20 people attend, and the Raumati one had about 300 people attend, 200 to 300 people attend. About 20 to 30 actually public were at the Otahuanga one, and the rest were all people that were either from CAP or the council or contractors. Because at the end of the meeting, they asked people to make a show of hands, and I was there and I was appalled that basically 80% of the hands went up, and they were actually involved in the process, sitting at the tables and writing down their own script. So tonight I'm very heartened to hear that you do want to engage with us, and that you actually have tried to reach out to us. So I don't know what went wrong in the Otaki and the central feedback session, but it went terribly wrong, and basically it was a pretty corrupt process. Raumati was robust, you probably didn't really enjoy it, but at least it started our conversations now, and thanks to the community board, we are now actually getting to ask you some questions. We're 3 years into this process, and now it's only now that we're actually getting to communicate with you and ask you questions, and we're really grateful for that. This should have been happening right from the beginning. So how do you reach people and not only get 20 people at a feedback you do that by possibly doing a mail drop or something, it's not that expensive. But I think that's what somebody did, and that's why you had 300 people at the meeting. So that's your solution, and I hope going forward that you actually take that on board and actually get behind what you're saying that you do want to do, and it is to actually really properly engage us. I think being here tonight and last night sort of shows that you are being genuine now. It's been a long wait. Okay, so that's the background for that. Question. So we've talked about insurance quite a bit, and it's really sad to hear about the Lady Overly's experience. It's not the first one I've been hearing lately. Since the things have gone on the limbs, the real estate market is starting to go a bit wonky. And so basically they are using the Jacobs report, the council, I'm not saying it was from CAP. And there's a lot of problems with the Jacobs report, it's very faulty. And it uses implausible science. So a lot of people already are being harmed in our community. And it's a really serious thing. And as a community, I urge you all to start talking to each other and keep on the engagement with CAP and other groups in the community that are trying to help protect your properties. So there has been several times denial about insurance, that what you're doing won't get insurance, and I think that's a very naive belief. Because we're seeing it happen already. I heard last night there was one person already that has had their insurance refused, and a lot of people have been coming. I've been hearing about have said that their insurances have been increased substantially, and this is so. From what I understand, your process is going to inform council, and the council is going to make a decision, and then it's going to go on our lists. So I think it's irresponsible to think and say that you have no responsibility for what you are going to be recommending to council, that you don't, and therefore that's going to be used, because they're going to use your recommendations. It's a very important job you're doing, it's a very responsible job. So my point is, you can't stand here in a community meeting and deny that what we're doing is not going to affect us, and affect our insurance premiums and possibly the value of our houses. So, I mean, you said it last night that you're not responsible, but I don't see it that way, and I don't think any of the ratepayers here, or any of the community, see that you're not responsible.
Could you just give us some ideas as to what you think ought to happen in relation to how that would not impact on insurance? Because it is impacting throughout New Zealand. You know, Cyclone Gabrielle, things like that have put insurance premiums up. So what do you, if you were writing a recommendation, so I just want the 2 or 3 lines on insurance, what would you recommend?
Question. Okay, so first of all, I would use plausible science.
Yeah, go beyond the science.
Right, and so therefore your recommendation would be good. So if I was in an insurance situation, what you've asked me, is that I would be informed by people's limbs, because if a hazard is on people's limbs, then as an insurance company, if you're not actually allowing for that risk, then you're not doing your job properly. So you're actually putting the insurance companies in a no-win situation. So by using exaggerated maps like we're seeing tonight, where you're going to have hazard lines going 2 kilometres in length on a beach that's accreting, then that's really irresponsible, because then most of the Kapiti residents are going to have hazard lines, which is called a coastal adaptation area, on their limbs.
So what would you recommend, what would your 2-line, I recommend, I as a member of...
I would take the coastal adaptation area off all limbs, and because
so
if you use...
report, there shouldn't be any reference to...
Should be no reference to Jacobs report, it hasn't been peer reviewed, it uses false science.
So I don't want to be arguing with you, but I'm there to understand this. Do you think there should be any reference on any council website about the fact that we're on the coast and there could be an impact from erosion or sea
You see two things there, the fact that we're on the coast, and there could be. They are not the same thing.
It's a valid question.
Okay, okay, my point to you, Susie, then, is if you use 4.5 and you actually use the seawall in the modelling, there would be no coastal adaptation area which goes 2 k's inland. I suspect that the hazard would stop at the seawall. So none of this would be happening.
So what would your recommendation be if you were me? I recommend that.
Well, I recommend that we maintain our seawalls. After all, Holland's been living underneath a sea level rise all the time. And I would not be I would be maintaining what we've got and probably your lovely idea with hexagons. I love hexagons. You know, I would be talking positively to the community. And I mean, there's been $3 to $4 million spent on this process. We could have built loads of hexagonal walls in that time. And then we've had no hazards on our titles. I really do think this is, you know, an agenda that, I think you guys are genuine people and you're trying really hard. And I can see that now. I didn't initially because we talked about this. And I think even though these are uncomfortable conversations, we've been waiting 3 years, Susie. We've asked and asked and asked these questions. So I think we're actually starting to get nudged together a little bit closer, and I'm very grateful for that because we're not on the same page yet, but we're getting closer, both of us, I think. So, yeah, thank you.
My name is Tim Reeves, and I've lived on the coast here for 60 years, and 50 of those have been on the beach front. I've been a diver at Kapiti Island for over 40 years. The rocks at low tide are still at the same height. The rocks at the high tide are still at the same height. The sea level's not rising. So, you know, we're just pushing some shit that, you know, that you've been told to push because you've told that science said it's rising, but it's not. So you need to, you know, look, so you're educated people, you are able to ask other scientists who aren't driven by some other agenda to say that we have global warming and the sea level's rising, because it's not. Because there's gauges in Wellington Harbour, check it out yourself, goes 1 to 2 millimetres a year. So you must be able to go and find that and represent that to council and say, well, you're saying there's a problem here, but it's not. You know, I've lived on the beachfront. I've got a house on the beach. I've lived there for 12 years, and Raumati South, I moved there in 1965, 28 years. Manly Street, the sand dunes just keep on getting bigger and bigger. So, yeah. That's just with 1,000 words. And you just got to put a paper saying, you know, this I want that one just a load of shit. Really? Honestly, sorry to swear, but.
I've got a question.
Well, it's just an answer to a lot of stuff that's going around. And I'm not afraid to, you know, speak my mind. I look at the sea every day, I'm out there all the time. It's not rising. So maybe look at it from another angle. Yeah, but I've got a question here that hopefully you can answer. Yeah, on the topic of responsibility for harm to ratepayers, and there is going to be harm, including myself. I pay over $5,000 a year in insurance already, and rates have gone up $600. Why, I don't know. I see this fast unfolding because you're going to be making recommendations on plausible science back to the council, because it's not real science. And then the council will take them and refuse responsibility, and they will, on the recommendations that you've made, because you are recommending to them, but you really need to broaden your horizon and look outside the little narrow perimeter that you're looking through. Because there's a lot of other science out there, and I've been to other meetings where other scientists have spoken, and they get hushed down. They don't get any coverage on the media because they don't want that sort of information getting out there. They're pushing an agenda that is not real. So, because you're recommending and you're going to be held responsible, and so will the council if you let this go through, because there's a lot of people who are going to be financially in hardship. You know, that they have no insurance, can't sell your house, and then they're going to have to remove the services. How are you going to sleep at night? You're going to make a recommendation that there's a sea level rise, but really there's not.
I think we get the point. Yeah, yes. Cool. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So 60 years, you say?
Yeah. No, I'm 65.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you were at least, like, probably 30 on that. Let's do all that fish and chips, so. Any comments? No? Okay, cool. All right, thanks. Take it away. Yeah. All right.
I just want to reiterate what I said before, that if the sea level doesn't rise, so the comments on said, what about maybe it won't happen? If it won't happen, we won't step into the next part of the pathway. So it's just planning. If it happens, then...
Sorry, can I just add, Susie? I'm just going to read an email. This is black and white without the word of a lie when we were discussing development in my area. Personally, I would encourage more of a managed retreat approach here.
So, sorry, who's the email from?
Between Greater Wellington Regional Council and Kapiti Council. So
we
I appreciate that, but
we're trying to get your views. We are not the council or the regional.
But I think to the gentleman's point saying about the information that you provide back and your questions, Joanne, about what would you do for the insurance side of things, I guess what we're saying is a lot of our properties and therefore future are in your hands. And so I would desperately ask that when you consider the science that you're putting forward in the recommendations, it feels and seems as though some decisions have already been made about the managed retreat. And I agree with the other gentleman about the other pathways.
My
There's so many
comment
great
for
stuff in
tonight
there,
is
right?
retreat is a last resort option. Absolutely last resort.
Yeah.
So maybe you could speak a little bit on our behalf and say they're jumping the gun because it's your last resort, but they're saying I will treat it as a managed retreat today. And then the following sentence is, but we don't have a framework to push that.
The point is, it goes on our limbs. So it doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow or in 100 years. It's on our limbs. And the insurance is very
Can I just comment, because again, it's a good point. So somebody's opinion doesn't mean that a formal decision's been made, but my whole hope out of this meeting, coming back to the hope, is that the Raumati people would tell CAT what they do want for the future. So we can argue about the science all day long, but I'd rather hear what you need in place, what you think needs to be done to protect your properties. Right? Seawalls, eco-reefs, right? What are the things that matter to you that will give you a future in Raumati? That's what I want to communicate to them, right? Because a lot of the stuff we can argue, and we have for a long time, but it doesn't necessarily get us towards that hopeful future.
The managed retreat needs to be removed.
We can't control what a staff member in Greater Wellington Regional Council say. All we can do is communicate, certainly all I can do from here is communicate Raumati community's views to our council to make sure that that is heard in that place and that we get the protections we need.
But they're putting pathways at the end of the managed retreat.
Yeah.
This group here.
Yeah.
So therefore it's harming us.
Can you take down slide 5, please? You've got managed retreat.
Managed retreat, it's just awesome.
So that is quite a strong view from certain sectors of Raumati that managed retreat should not even be part of the discussion.
We've got seawalls.
Yeah. So that's heard, absolutely.
And hazard zones off our time.
Right.
The coastal adaptation area should not go 2 kilometres inland when we've got seawalls.
Right.
That is crazy.
Right. So this is the opportunity for hear those things from you.
And
But again,
most of our beaches are accreting.
I'm going to stop you there, Joe,
Okay.
because there are some other people that want to ask questions. And I know, Linda, you haven't asked a question at all, so I want to make sure we get to you before we finish. So, Debbie, I know you've got a question there, so.
Hello everyone, my name is Deborah. I've lived on the Kapiti Coast off and on for over 50 years. I guess first of all, it's a concern, I've got a question right at the end. It does concern me that this whole process wasn't actually a grassroots initiative from the community. That concerns me because we haven't actually asked for this process. And I think to date we've spent, taxpayers have spent over $3 million for all of this, and we're a long way from being done yet. I guess there's a lot of hazards, day to day. There are a lot of hazards, and living on the coast, I guess we see that in terms of, we've chosen to live in a coastal area, and you have to expect the unexpected. But what I would like to see is simply that which is what we just covered before, is, retaining the seawalls, maintaining obviously water and waste pipe infrastructure, really keep doing, this whole process seems extreme to me, because I think what council have been doing in the past in terms of trying to maintain the seawalls, obviously looking where we could possibly do further work is fantastic. I actually don't see really what was wrong with what we have been doing all along. I think the process, I didn't want the process. I'm sure a lot of people, if they had wanted this, would have been coming to council's door saying, we would like this initiative, can you please take action? I believe it actually came from the Ministry of Environment, so it wasn't something the community asked for. So I guess my last question around this is, in terms of the pathways, will the community get to vote on these different pathways? Because I'm wondering whether there should be an option in there that should be, we either do nothing or we simply look at seawalls and infrastructure, which is what obviously council have been doing for years anyway.
So your position is we should just keep doing what we've always done here in Raumati?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, keep assessing, look at the retaining walls,
Yeah.
put money into the retaining walls.
We're about to get that seawall replaced south of the stream. It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to comment on that? Really, sort of, you've heard the view, and that's probably useful to hear.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So will we get to, like, vote
Oh, we
on the
get to
different
vote.
pathways? Like the community will get input about what those different pathways are?
So the next process, once CAB makes their recommendations to council,
Yeah.
that will then kickstart the process that's likely to be a couple of years long, in my view. The last district plan change we had was PC2 about medium density building. That was a couple of years in massive consultation. This will be that sort of level of work. So there will.
Can you answer the question though? Will we get the opportunity to have?
No, I don't know.
No.
What I'm saying is, council will be running that process, which will be a public consultation process. Councillors will vote, so be careful who you vote for.
Yeah.
Right? That's going to be your key. It's who's going to be sitting at that table when these decisions are made.
But maybe consultation suddenly looks like declaration rather than invitation. It suddenly looks like this is what we've decided rather than how do you want us to represent you.
I can't control that process, and nobody in this room can tell you what that's going to look like. Right? All I can say is that there will be a big process, and who's in that room will make a difference. Yeah.
And some of it, there are other reports being done, and those reports themselves could actually change the pathways. because we don't know what the impact of groundwater is going to be around the area. And that's really important, and that report should be coming out, I think, sometime this year. But it's not going to be included in ours.
Is it covering in an earthquake, groundwater?
Have you got last night's slideshow where it showed 9A, 9B, and the other side of where it is affected by?
Oh, yeah.
Or inundation.
Yeah.
Just to answer your question about consultation,
It was on last night's slideshow.
as far as the CAP is concerned, within our terms of reference and what we can and can't do, we have every intention of consulting when we get to a point where we have some recommendations that we think could be finalised and passed on to the council. But what the council then does is a decision for the council to make. We can't control, we can recommend what we think that we want them to do, but they of course can decide what that should be.
If the public decided, I guess, or the community decided they wanted a different pathway submitted with obviously your report or recommendation to council, if there was enough waiting or enough people wanting it. And I don't know what that would be, I don't know what that pathway is.
If we get to a point where we've got the economic analysis and we've crunched all the numbers and we say for Raumati, for this particular subunit, these are the three pathways that we think we recommend, and we come into a public meeting like this to consult, and the public is saying, hang on, we don't like those. We'll be saying, well, what ones do you like?
Yes.
What should we be recommending?
Thank you.
And we'll go away and have another think.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Again, Raumati Community Board will be happy to facilitate those conversations, right? All right, Cameron, and then we'll go, last question will be yours, Linda, because we're heading on 9 o'clock.
The meeting with Martin, that'll be a documented meeting, so that'll be published. The minutes will be published on it.
And if we, the meeting with all the questions that are on that, start off with it.
See it on the website.
And if we didn't publish it, then Martin would.
Yeah, so if we remove the science from the whole equation and go back to the step of the ground, all we really need to do is plan what happens before it gets to that point. Exactly.
Right, yes.
You're right.
Yes. The analogy I used at the start of the evening was a fire plan, right? Fire might not happen, but if it does, we just want to know what to do. Yeah. But we want to avoid some of these harms, right, in the process. All right, Linda.
Good evening. First, I'd like to apologise for being late. My mum has young children, so I have to get into it first. Just asking a question about like a lot of people here, I didn't know about this meeting until today. I had a meeting booked in for next Tuesday, which is actually from another, a better drop, to talk about what's happening here. I found out this from a friend of mine who'd gone to last night's meeting. So engagement-wise, are you able to say you don't have a real budget for that? Does that, you do have a budget?
No,
You don't have a budget?
We're going to consultants.
So are you allowed to engage with the community through things like Facebook?
No.
You're not?
We do have access to the Have Your Say website,
Yeah.
and we can use that, and we have used that in the past, and we do need to refresh that and put more information on, but that's the only social media option that we have available.
Is the community board able to post on Facebook?
We do, we have.
Okay. On like the Pukuru community page, or
So
is it on
we
all the different community pages, or?
right, so we put, so for example, these meetings, we set them up as events on Facebook, on our own community board Facebook page. I then shared them out to the Raumati community page and Raumati community news, because they're Raumati. I didn't do them to Kapiti or Paraparaumu because they're Raumati focused meetings. I also paid personally to boost those events in the Raumati area. Tim did a letterbox drop to parts of Raumati. We emailed it out to certain groups locally that we could through these groups. But you know, this is something that we sort of...
But it's not just Raumati, because there'll be another meeting for the Paraparaumu.
Don't know. We set this up as
You set it up,
Raumati. So
okay.
you would hear at the start.
No,
so
I
you're coming
wasn't,
late.
sorry.
Yeah.
So,
We can talk about some of this afterwards if
Kat,
you like.
in the sense of the rest of the community, like, we're already kind of poorly informed. For the rest of the community, I mean, I told my mother-in-law who lives in Raumati Beach that their, you know, relatively new built home might be in an endangered, you know, retreated zone, and insurance might be that big a problem. And she knew nothing about it. And most people I talk to know absolutely nothing about it. And it feels, I know it's not your intention, but it does feel really underhanded. So if there's a way that not just these, but you could come up with engaging the community. I'm a mum, I read school newsletters. If you're able to approach schools, if it's and say, can we put this in your updates that we're having a meeting, or stuff, you know, it's an online, you know, a lot of people don't read the Observer or the Happy News, they use stuff for online things. Anyway, just a few ideas there. And yeah, I support the Seahawks, do what we've been doing type thing. And for the LIM reports, is there a way to get the Jacobs report taken off the LIM reports? If it's now being recognised as not being completely supported, and you're moving to different reports, and the council's grabbed the Jacobs report, are you able to advise the council not to use the Jacobs report, and that even if going forward there is some sort of, I'm not saying that I'm wanting it, but if there is some sort of adaptation for our region, it's kind of like the ponding areas in Takutai Beach. You know, there's advisement on there in the other reports, but it's not, what should I say? Pardon? Detrimental. Yeah, it's not like you can't live there, it's going to flood every time it rains type thing. And is there a way to take Jacob's report off the reports, and you know that the council knows that there is an adaptation area, and then it's of the insurance due diligence to check local council reports. Does that make sense, rather than it being on?
So I think that the LIM side of things is something for being to take up.
With council.
With council.
I think what we can do as a panel is very limited. But what I'm hearing, and I think we can relay back to the council, are the concerns that are being raised, and ask the council to have a really hard look at this and respond to the community, because it quite clearly is a community issue, and as a council, it's something they need to address.
And so a little bit late, so this might have been covered. Are you still supporting the Jacobs report? Is that?
We simply using the Jacobs report as a document with information that is perhaps added to or augmented or supplemented in what we're doing. it's certainly not a single focus for the CAP. It's a technical report. When we first started this work, we were advised by the council that we had to support us project team, which is council people, and the technical advisory group, which is a bunch of consultants that would be retained by the council, and there would be a range of different reports that we would be given to help us. The only one really that we've had, I think, and these people will correct me if I'm wrong, is the Jacobs report. We actually didn't get the social impact report. We know one was done, we didn't get it. We have two cultural reports from local iwi, as has been mentioned, north and south. We certainly haven't got the economic analysis yet, but we know we're getting that early next month. So we're simply using the documentation the council's made available, but then going out and doing our own research and looking at what other reports and what other information is available that can help us reach some sort of informed conclusion.
And I think a lot of the heavy will say, a lot of people have responded to those things. And we have had a lot of, we've had a lot of comments from a lot of people, like, several years ago when we started out, we were sitting in the libraries, you know, in the afternoons, in the mornings, on Saturday mornings, different places, trying to capture different people and where was it that we had the 1100, from the Raumati one we had 1100 comments just on that one. So we've been up in Otaki when we started, and we were sitting outside the gyms and the cafeterias, and we had school kids coming in. We've been a lot of places, and we've met a lot of people and business groups, you know, who have then said they'll take information out. So we have sourced a lot of material ourselves just from the community, which is our main role, is finding out what you want.
I'm thinking outside things like the eco reef. It was through us that eco reef. The issue of eco reef and the fact that it's there, that came to us at a meeting at Paragon Library, at one of our meetings, a public meeting. That's of course we heard about it. Not a public meeting, it's a drop-in centre. Yeah. So we have had a lot of drop-in centres all the way around, and I have had some good things to add as well.
So this is my last question. So going back to that Jacobs report and you being our advisory panel, someone mentioned to the council giving recommendations, and are you able to, I think everyone here doesn't want the Jacobs report on their list, are you able to go back to them and say, we don't recommend that this be on a LIM report, but it be available, you know, all of our information be available once we've come up with a plan?
I think we should go back and say, we picked up from the community, there's a serious concern about having the Jacobs report on the LIM. And the communities are actually not happy that it's there.
We don't want it.
They don't want it there.
We're not happy.
It's actually unscientific. You can't tell them to take it off. You can say, pick up from the
No,
tree.
you can say the community don't want it.
Yes,
It's actually unscientific.
we can do that. Yes, we can do that.
And just to, how are you going to make this about that? How are you going to start how that's going?
That would presumably come back to the council, to the community board, isn't it?
Probably something that council itself would need to communicate through its channels.
It feels like the broader question for these guys is they're the experts, right? Like this is, I know you're saying that you just volunteered to help, but you have got a collective, you know, a level of knowledge, so it's not just sort of speaking on our behalf to say the Jacobs report, not on the LIM, but also if you great, and then it's being used already by putting the water on these limbs, and so you guys going back and saying the community don't want it on the limb report is not.
So there are some scientists coming out and saying, talking about 8.5 plus, because we don't know what's happening with the Antarctic ice shelf. We don't know what's happening with the Greenland ice shelf. And
Can I make a wee suggestion? Like you obviously hopefully get hope. Do you get paid by the council? You don't. Nobody at all. Well, I think that's really wrong. What about going into Wellington and seeing the harbour master where they have the gauge, where it goes up between 1 and 2 millimetres a year, and if you were able to cite that or get information on that, and then
sorry, what I was talking about was the future. We don't know what is going to happen as a result of if the Antarctic ice sheet melts, if the Greenland ice sheet melts, we don't know.
What about if the comet hits us? Do you know what's going to be next?
Well, hang on. I think we're probably at the point where you probably need to say we've covered.
It's likely. No.
I think.
Not likely.
I think, Joanne, I'm just going to say.
Okay.
Yep. So I understand we have these tough, sometimes emotive conversations, and it's cool.
It's our homes.
Yep. And mine too. And business.
Yep.
The gauge is there, but are you able to have a look at that and take that to council and say to the council, well,
So,
the gauge say?
alright, so Tim, I will repeat something that I said and I was going to do. So, just so we're clear, on the Takutai, and Linda, this is probably something you may not be aware of too. The Takutai Kapiti website, which I can send you a link if you email me, that contains all of the information that Takutai Kapiti are using. Right, so that is publicly available information, including scientific data about sea levels. Is that on record?
Not the correct ones.
We print stuff in, I think, on that basis.
Right, I think you was talking about the volume of stuff that is available. So the information that's being used isn't hidden, it is publicly available. Also on that website is, you can enter your details so that you get email updates, newsletter from Takutai Kapiti, so that will keep you informed. Keep an eye on the Raumati Community Board Facebook page, because anything that happens in Raumati, obviously we will put up there, right? And keep in touch with us. My card's on the table if you want to email me. I think the question about the information on the limbs is something I can follow up with council and provide an answer if you email me. I can't guarantee the answer will be satisfactory, but I can pass on the answer that I get. Right. As I said at the start of this is a meeting that we set up as a Raumati Community Board in order to invite Cap in so that our community could have this chance to speak.
Thank you.
Right? That's my role. Yes, there's something burning in your area.
Is there anywhere that, like tomorrow, I can go online and put in what I consider to be the
Right.
Can't hear what
Yep.
what I consider.
So there's a couple of things.
I'll accept.
Yep, there's a couple of things you can do. One, we've put some pieces of paper on the table here, where if there's any questions or comments that you want to make, you can put them there. No, or if you pick up my card off the table, or Tim, I think is your card there too, either of us, email us your issue, your points, your comments, and we will forward it to the CAT team.
Thank you.
Right? So we will act as that conduit to feed information in.
I just think one of your answers is just what if we have big earthquake and the land rise like my core?
Yep.
That's exactly right. If we have a pathway to deal with it, we have a plan to deal with it. That's what we need a plan to deal with. That's what we're trying to get.
I've been told since I was a kid that there could be a massive earthquake in Wellington any moment. Right? But I do know what to do in an earthquake, so. Right, I'm gonna end it there. There's a lot of conversations that we could still have. Feel free to get in touch with me or Tim or any of us at the community board. Feel free to stick around and put some stuff on paper. There's also the Raumati vision process which you can feed into as well. Come along to next Tuesday night, Raumati Community Board. We're talking about the seawall replacement, so if you're interested in that, come along.
Tuesday.
Thank you.